please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
It's 4 years of the NDA government with Prime Minister Modi at the helm of affairs. Lots of promises have been made, and today we're going to take stock of some of the critical missions under the Ministry of Urban Affairs and Housing. Mr. Puri, thank you very much for speaking with CNBC TV 18. Before we go on to some of the critical missions, I think the burning topic right now is the cabinet approval of home buyers' right as financial creditors under the amendments proposed for IBC, sir. Home buyers are still worried that, how are they going to get a resolution, even though this is a very positive step? Can you assure them that they will get their homes?
My job is not to assure anybody. My job is to get some action. And I can tell you that there was understandable anxiety because RERA and the Insolvency Code came into being at roughly the same time. Now, which legislation takes precedence over the other? We don't know. But we have been arguing all along from this ministry that the home buyers are in a particularly vulnerable position and that they need to be safeguarded in terms of their interest. Now, they have contributed to the development of the asset. So I'm glad that the position of financial creditor has been accorded to them. Will this solve all their problems? Well, I don't know. And perhaps not all their problems. But let's look at the series of steps which have been taken. After 70 years of our existence as an independent, sovereign, democratic country, we have a regulator.
Right.
Having a regulator provides a lot of safeguards. Now, any project which is undertaken, 70% of the proceeds have to be put in an escrow account. So the kind of problem that we faced in areas around Delhi, etc., where unscrupulous builders and promoters took people's money away, will be hopefully prevented in the future.
Right.
Hopefully, as I said.
But the problems are all for buyers who are already stuck. Now, this is a very positive step. We ran a Twitter poll and 77% have said that they welcome this step. But they're still a bit hopeless because they're still caught between look at the JP case.
Define the nature of the problem, Manisha. If your problem is that you have to pay an EMI, that's an arrangement between you and the bank. Let's say even if the property which you have invested in, there is a resolution on that, okay? And you get your flat, you'll have to continue paying the EMI. In many cases, and this is where I think we need to define the problem and look at the solution in relationship to that. What has happened is that the unscrupulous builder or promoter has taken the poor home buyer's money and that value of land has collapsed and therefore he's not in a position to pay back. Some of them have assets. Those assets hopefully you can liquidate and give the buyer either the money back or the home that they have been seeking. But there are a series of problems. A lot of people, because they were not careful, signed one-sided contracts. Now this is not, now many people turn around and say this is due to RERA. This is because you did not have RERA that the problem took place. Having RERA means that now the problem will not recur. But what happens to a problem which predates RERA?
Right.
All right. Some of the state governments tweaked the provisions of ongoing projects. We are trying to correct that. I have had one meeting of the RERA's advisory committee, which was just about a week or so ago. We've decided to hold 3 regional meetings, one for the West India, one for East India, one for South India, and the states there. I think we're taking a number of steps, and this ordinance which was passed yesterday on securing the position of the home buyers is a small but significant step.
It's very significant. They were at the bottom of the pile, sir.
Exactly. But now what has happened is that the banks are unhappy.
I was going to come to that, sir, that the banks now are, there's the other side of the story is that banks may not want to lend to real estate worried about the
I am coming precisely
dichotomy.
to that. Since land is a state subject, in some respects, you could argue that the central government doesn't have a role to play. But quietly, without the presence of the camera and the lights of the camera, we've been having a series of meetings. And every time I have touched the subject, when we have been campaigning, if you want to use the word, with the Department of Corporate Affairs to secure the interests of the home buyer, But we always had problems because the bank will turn around and say, well, you know, the home buyer is in problem, but we are already in enough problems. I would say that it requires resolution, the whole system, and the resolution is coming. But you will have to navigate your way through this very carefully.
It's a painful resolution though, sir. For home buyers, it's a personal pain. For banks, it's an institutional pain.
No, it's just not an institutional pain. The bank can also go down. And the home buyers, I would like to think that for a first-time single home owner, it is catastrophic, I can tell you. It is catastrophic. But not everyone. And now I'm going to say something which is not going to make me very popular with home buyers, but I hope they realize by now that we are batting on their behalf, is that some of them are speculative investors.
Right.
And that is why some of these problems have arisen. If you were a genuine first-time home buyer, and my heart goes out to them, believe me, I know what it is to take one's entire life's earnings and put it into one basket, one home, and then find that you have been shortchanged by an unscrupulous buyer. I think the correctives are taking place.
And they will get a resolution.
Of course they will get a resolution.
It's not going to be immediate.
No, Manisha, but you know, if you tell somebody you will get a resolution, somebody who's been waiting 7 or 8 years, you don't become very popular by saying you will get a resolution one day. But I tell you, there are some ground level changes. For instance, on the value of land. Believe me, the differential between Delhi and Noida, that differential was to a certain extent equalized. Not equalized, I would say, differential was reduced because you had the Noida toll bridge. You had the metro going there. The differential in land values between Noida and Greater Noida, again, because of the expressway, again, metro going to Greater Noida, etc. The building of the next airport in Jiwar, that will also help. So I think there are a situation, and the market doesn't always go down. The market is characterized by mismatch, asymmetry. There was an excess supply in certain segments that needs to be corrected. So when the solution comes, what I'm worried about is that many people will turn around and say the solution is not exactly on the terms on which they wanted the solution.
Agreed.
You know, when you are in what I would say, dire straits, and you look for a solution, a lot of people will have to take a haircut. And that haircut, thank God, will not only be the home buyers. That's the good news. So if you say 77% responded positively to your tweet, I can just tell you, I get a lot of angry social media comments most of the time. Today they're slightly less because of the ordinance.
No, absolutely. They're hopeful now.
And I don't react adversely to that. I keep reason. I have meetings here with the resolution professional, with Anuj Jain. I call in people from all the groups, and each one I say, please be a little careful. You know, sometimes when you ask for the very best, then you are actually opposing a reasonable solution. Because in an ideal world, you should invest in a property.
So reasonable resolution is what
reasonable and practical. Reasonable and practical. A lot of people buy homes because there's an expectation that, you know, you invest in a property today, it'll be 3 times the value tomorrow. But sometimes it's difficult to get your original value back.
All right. Let's now move on to some of the critical missions under your ministry. And I think one of them, which is very close to the Prime Minister's heart, is Housing for All. You actually predated the mission by 2 years and said we'll be able to complete that by 2020 instead of 2022.
I'm now talking about 2019.
All right. The figures I have, sir, is 46 lakh homes sanctioned under PMAY Urban. 26 grounded and 7 completed. Yeah. Now 7 lakh seems like a very small number. So you believe that
No, it's not at all. It's not at all.
The target will be met, sir?
Oh, my target will be, you know, on the rural side. Mr. Tomar, Shri Narendra Singh Tomar ji was telling me the other day, he'll have 1 crore homes handed over by December 2018.
Fantastic.
I felt a little left out, so I said I will have 1 crore sanctioned. The total number I have to build, which is the gap between what we have, so that every Indian has a home, you know, every Indian citizen with a title in the name of the lady of the house and all that, is 11 million.
Right, so 1.1 crore.
1.1 crore. So I've done 4.5 lakhs already, 4.6 lakhs. 4.6 million.
46 lakhs, right.
The demand per month offtake is 300,000 or 500,000. So let us say we do the 300,000 a month, okay? Into 12, that is 36 lakhs. So 46 lakhs and 36 lakhs is 8.2 million.
Right.
Gap will be just 2 million or so, 2 point something. If we do at the rate of 500,000 a month, 500,000 into 12 is 60 lakhs.
Right.
60 plus 4.5 a million, 6 and 4 points, 10.5, you're already there. So I'm always careful with words, because I came from a different profession where every word you had to measure, and that you might be either overstating a case or not capturing a nuance. But I say it is a 2022 completion scheme, and when I said 2020, and let's say if we do even at the lower rate, as long as the resources are there, that's the main thing in this scheme. We'll get it done by 2019, not even 2020.
The industry, and I'm going to represent them. I know that we do tend to go after them because in the past there have been many.
Listen. My job is to protect the home buyers. Well, that's what RERA is all about.
No.
So when RERA, the home buyers are. But equally, I'm equally clear in my mind. If you don't have builders, how are you going to build the nation?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're not going to get.
So on that note, sir, let me talk about a few of the tax irritants which are there. There is a tax on inventory which is unsold post 1 year. This was done at a time when one was believing that developers tend to stock up on inventory for price rise. That is not the case on that.
This is not the case.
The second is that capital gains that you make, you do need investors also back into the market to keep the market robust. You cannot invest the capital gains in more than one property. These are things that you can resolve with CBDT very easily and give that little spurt to the market.
I can assure you that these are ideas not only being raised by you, these are occupying the attention of people in government and in long
conversations happening with the tax department.
You have been asking me for 3-4 months what's happening to home buyers, what happened. What did I say? Off the record, I said we are pursuing it. On the record, I'm not going to be giving a statement on something which is legitimately the turf of a colleague in the cabinet, okay, in the Council of Ministers.
Agreed, sir.
Look, it's not just the unsold inventory which attracts attention. If you have another flat and you're keeping it vacant, the man may want to tax your what is called a deemed
right, sir.
He thinks he wants to tax it because you're keeping it big for a speculative purpose. The honest God's truth may be that you've tried very hard. So I would advise people to keep all the evidence that you've advertised, that you've been in touch with agent, and then show that to the taxman. That's one way. But I think you're making a larger point, that the CBDT needs to take this into account. And all I can tell you is, insofar as that we are at a ministry which deals with urban affairs and housing, yes, we will bring it to their attention.
All right, let's move on then.
We have brought it also to them.
You have brought it. It's an important
maybe
point.
It needs to be done in a more comprehensive and focused way.
All right. Smart City Mission. Now let's come to that. I know I've spoken to you in Bhopal, but I'm citing your numbers, sir. 936 projects, 30,000 crores deployed already. And we will see a lot of traction by the end of 2018, you've said.
I used to say earlier, you will see in the physical manifestation between June and December. And when I said June and December, I deliberately plugged it at June. You have the 9th Smart City Integrated Command and Control section, and you and I were there. And I kept asking you, I referred to you in the speech, I said, I hope some of your cynicism is there when you see what is happening. Look, a smart city by definition is a slightly complex thing. You first need to appoint a project management consultant, PMC. That takes 10, 12, 15 months. It's not that you get up in the morning, most state administration, "Arey hum chala lenge." My additional chief secretary will do it. My urban affairs secretary will do it. When I had the smart cities first conclave, the point I made to everyone is you cannot do it that way. It is a very comprehensive, complex entity, a smart city development, and you need to devote full-time attention to it. So my first point is you need a PMC, you need a special purpose vehicle. It's not something that you can hold as additional charge. I'm Minister for Housing and I can be additional charge of something else. No, this is a full-time job. Once you get that done, then you have to look at the tendering, and the tendering has to be in minute detail.
Yes, okay? Otherwise you'll be taken to court.
Thank you for answering a question which you are yourself raising, Manisha. I agree with you. Therefore, you have to be extremely careful. What is the good news? We're getting there. Of the projects which have been tendered, touch wood, we are managing well. I'm not saying everything's all right. I get angry letters from members of parliament. You have no clue, and what kind of a minister are you, and so on. So hold on. It's easy to criticize without knowing something. The smart city project and the special purpose vehicle have deliberately been so designed, like the Delhi Metro, to insulate them from the populist politics of the area. So if you were, when some people say we are not being consulted, I said you're part of the advisory committee, the MLAs and MP. But they are looking for some of them are looking for consultation of a different kind.
Right.
All right? The interference in the tendering. We will not let that happen. Now, once you have this going, then it catches a momentum. Now, when you went to Bhopal the other day, or if you go to Indore, or you go to Ahmedabad, etc., cities, it's not just that the smart cities, most 90 out of these 99 are brownfield investments. So you're taking an existing structure. Now, if you have the capacity to make it Swachh, as the Sarvekshan has shown, you're probably getting the other things right.
Absolutely.
And if you're getting one wrong, then you're getting the whole cascade wrong.
So let me ask you another interesting observation out of the success stories of Smart City, and now that I have gone through it in detail, it is these states where center and state are aligned, and the three, you've named some cities, sir, and I could add names of more cities, but they tend to be from progressive states like MP, Gujarat and Maharashtra. Rest of them where either the center and state governments are not aligned or the state governments are a little lax. There is a delay, sir.
No, it's not that. It's not that. May I go a little further to take your own reasoning? Most of the states are on board. There are one or two which are completely off the radar. That's the real problem. You have to factor in, Manisha, the fact that the announcement of the 99 cities was staggered. You got the first lot in, I think, in 2016 January,
yes.
And you got the last lot in
your lighthouse cities.
Yeah, and the lighthouse, and you got the last lot in a few weeks ago. So now, how do you compare a city which was conferred that position in January 2016 with the first quarter of 2018? There's a big gap. Now, your real point of worry and my real point of worry is some of them in the first lot have not taken off. That's the first. That's my worry.
Yes.
But that's because of one particular state. That's one state. Now, that particular state specializes in not responding to any initiative from the center.
I think there are more than one of those. But
no, I am not aware, because I'll tell you something. Writing letters to chief ministers, I think, is a standard requirement of this job.
Okay, let me visit Varanasi. I will come back with the ground reports.
You'd be amazed. You'd be amazed on what's happening in Varanasi. Really? I was there the other day, and because my constituency, or rather the adopted constituency, or the one which has been given to Sonbhadra, I go via Varanasi. And I called my project director of the Swachh Bharat. I said, this is not correct. He had to remind me I was not in Varanasi. I was in an adjoining
So things, Kochi, Varanasi, these I thought were slow starters. And Kochi looked like it was fast, but let me not come to that. Let's give them a little bit more time.
Give them a little more time. But Varanasi is doing very well on other. And look, there are reasons for that. One is you were a late starter. But then I think the attention is getting in the state government, and the central government is helping move it forward. Yeah.
Okay. You said you wanted to isolate the SPVs. But here we have a situation.
Insulate them from populist
Pardon
politics.
me on the yes.
Populist politics.
Having said that, sir, this was meant to be independent CEOs. Could be from the government, could be from the private sector. Today, as I see it, most of the private sector CEOs have left. Chennai is probably the only one which has one. They find it very difficult to work in the bureaucratic environment.
No, there are others. Goa has one.
More importantly, sir, the tenure is what worries me. I'll be very open and honest. If you do not give a clear directive from the center that the CEO has to be in that position for minimum 3 years, it is very hard to do something like a smart city mission.
I can be prescriptive, or we can suggest from the center. But let me ask you a question. How do you regulate an arrangement between a private sector person coming from the private sector and a government? Either one of them can. I mean, look, most people who come on to these jobs are coming out of a sense of mission. Okay? I mean, somebody's earning a basic salary of millions of dollars outside, decides to leave that and come.
So I don't mean about the private sector CEOs. That's a different question. Even the ones which are coming from civil services and IAS officers are getting moved very quickly. 1 year, 1.5 years, and the continuity is lost, sir.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And I think that the normal pattern of movement of officials, you know, in some states make a fine art of it. Move people around very quickly. Other states are different. But I think you make a point, and I take that on board. We should, I think, request the state governments that when it comes to SPVs of smart city projects, keep the project managers in place for longer periods.
All right. Next, let's come to Swachh. Lots of progress, and citizen involvement has been very progressive. I mean, we can beat it down quite a bit, but I'm not on that side at all.
You can beat down anything. You can beat down anything.
I know how difficult it is, sir. I've lived in this country, how hard it is to get the citizen engagement.
You got the citizen engaged. You got the citizen engaged. But the other thing is, most of the attempts to beat down are so pathetic because they are kachra outside my house. I crossed a bridge. There was a lot of kachra. That's anecdotal evidence. To which my answer is, we have a Swachhta app which has 97% compliant. Take a photograph and send it. I had somebody sent me a photograph the other day of Neil guys eating garbage because there was a breach in the wall. Well, I acted on it straight away. TDS repaired the wall, and the citizen response was fantastic. Look, this is not your and my project. This was a project of the government which has become a project of the people.
Yes.
That is what matters. And I think even our detractors, even those who thought that Swachhta was maybe not the highest priority which a newly elected Prime Minister, they're all eating their words. Fact of the matter is, as you got into it, as you got into the nitty and gritty of it, you realize how enormous the challenge was. That to me is the great news.
Launched in 2015, the Skill India mission was supposed to be the government's big push towards employment and employability. The aim of the mission was to skill over 1 crore people in 3 years with industry-relevant training in a bid to help them secure a better livelihood. Today, as part of our week-long series, we take a look at how successful the Skill India mission has been in its stated objective. CNBC TV18 filed RTI queries to dig out some data on the progress of the mission. Archana Shukla is standing by with the details of what the RTI queries got us, the information that we were able to find. Archana, over to you.
Well, yes, with a clear agenda of improving employability, PM Modi's focus through Skill India has been on providing skills, and hence the short-term skilling program has been the key under that mission. A clarification here that the data is a compilation of 2 short-term training schemes, one which was Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana 2015-16, which had some spillovers in the next fiscal, and another, an extension of this same scheme that will run between 2016 to 2020, where the government targets to skill 1 crore youth and has budgeted about 12,000 crore rupees for this program. Here is what the RTI data reveals. There is a substantial increase in the number of people who were skilled in FY17 and FY18. It has risen more than 4 times, from over 3.5 lakh people in FY17 to nearly 16 lakh people in FY18. But not everyone who's getting skilled is getting a job. In FY17, just over half of those skilled managed to find jobs. In FY18, this fell to below 30%, meaning just about 3 out of every 10 persons who undertook the Skill India program in FY18 found a job. So there is a 4-fold increase in those getting trained, but only a 2-fold increase in those finding jobs. Now let's look at a segmental or a sectoral breakup here. Agriculture, the largest contributor to GDP, saw a 2-fold rise in those trained, but placements were not forthcoming. Only 37% found jobs in FY18. Let's look at the labor-intensive sectors, like starting with leather. Over 5,400 people were trained in FY17, but this dropped to about 3,000 in FY18. Moreover, only 42% of those skilled found jobs in FY18. So essentially, there is a drop in the number of people who got skilled in this sector and also those who found jobs in leather industry. Let's look at textiles, the other labor-intensive sector. The number of people trained in FY18 compared to FY17 has halved, and only 55% found jobs in FY18. This is another labor-intensive sector that hasn't done too well as far as job creation is concerned. Capital goods, another one. Here is almost a 5-fold jump in the number of people trained from FY17 to FY18, but only 23% found a job in FY18. Leather, textile, capital goods are all export-oriented sectors where jobs are scarce, somewhere mirroring what is happening overall in the economy as well. Let's look at two sectors where the government has made a big push for training and skilling. First is the electronics industry. There is an 11-fold rise in the number of people trained between FY17 and FY18, but there is only a 5-fold increase in jobs, with 25% of those trained finding placements in FY18. There is an increase, but not a corresponding one. The IT industry is also mirroring the electronics industry. Once again, they saw a 15-fold increase in those getting trained, but only 2 out of 10 trained in that sector actually found a job. So there has been a substantial push in skilling people under the various sector skill councils and programs that this mission runs, but there isn't a corresponding jump as far as placements is concerned. The success of Skill India mission will only be true and reflective on ground if these skilled people actually found a job. Back to you.
Extremely comprehensive data which Archana has presented, but also disturbing in a way. Big gap, huge gap between the number of people getting trained, while good that on one hand the number of people opting for these training programs is seeing big increases, but at the same time, as a percentage of those numbers, the number of people actually being able to find jobs is going down, is going south, so worrying. Joining us now to discuss this and the various aspects of this are three eminent guests. D.K. Joshi is Chief Economist with CRISIL. Dr. Joshi, thanks very much for being with us here. We have Ajay Sahai, he's CEO of the Federation of Export Organization. And we have Ashok Agarwal, he's an advocate. He's also, of course, headed an organization in his previous role, which represented various small businesses. Gentlemen, thanks very much, all of you, for being here on the show. Mr. Sahai, let me begin by asking you, why is there a drastic drop in job creation in export-related sectors, labor-intensive sectors like leather and textiles? I mean, the RTI data reveals a very skewed picture. What could be the reasons, according to you, for this drop?
No, in fact, so far as exports are concerned, textile and leather, they have not done reasonably well in the last financial year. In fact, the apparel sector in particular is passing through a tough time. I think the root cause lies that over a period of time, the competitiveness of India in these sectors is going down, coupled with the fact that our neighbors are becoming more competitive. Number of factors are responsible for that, including the exchange rate. But the good news is that now, since the Indian rupee is depreciating fast in this fiscal year also, it has depreciated close to 5%, and if you take from the calendar rate around 6%, which is providing much needed competitiveness to the industry. We are hoping that since China is vacating the place in both of these segments, India has a chance to occupy the space which is being vacated by China, but there is fierce competition amongst countries to occupy the space, and therefore we have to provide very enabling and supportive environment for these sectors to thrive into the country. So far as the job creation is concerned, I think when we are talking about the jobs, we are talking about the job mostly in the formal sector. The two positive disruption which has happened into the country, the demonetization and the GST, has definitely initially caused a setback to labor intensive sectors, but over a period of time they are recovering. So while I do admit that in the recent past these sectors have not performed well, but I'm pinning my hopes on these sectors, and I'm sure whatever support is needed should be extended to the sector. And I think government is also quite conscious of the potential to these sectors. That's why when we talk about the fixed term employment, this started with apparel and textile only. So while there is no denying the fact that sector has not done well in the past, but we hope that in the years to come these will be some of the sectors, among some of the sectors which are destined to do very well in our country.
Well, yes, Mr. Saha, there is a need to push, ahead in these sectors as far as job creation is concerned. But the numbers on skill training for these sectors, which are also very skill intensive, don't seem to be online. What could be the reason, according to you, why the skill training has gone down in these sectors?
A number of factors responsible for that. Those in other sector may be getting better placement, they may be going for those sectors. Service sector over a period of time is now providing jobs to more and more people. That can be the factor. But the short point for these two sectors is that in these two sectors, it is small and medium companies who are dominating the sector. And I would not be wrong if I say that 95% of the companies who are operating in the sector will be small and medium companies, and these companies have passed through a little problem so far as the liquidity is concerned. Initially they were stuck with the refund problem under the GST. Now banks are also not coming forward to provide a helping hand to them, and since these companies, they are not cash rich company, they definitely have a liquidity problem. So one of the factor would be that also. But I do admit that in this sector, a lot of skilling is required, and in fact we should not leverage on the wages, because for the industry it is important what is your per unit cost of production. So even if your labor is cheap, if it is less skill, its productivity comes down, and that wage arbitrage no longer helps you. So skilling becomes important, but when it comes to the skilling, I think we should not put all hopes on the government. Industry also have to be proactively engaged in the program of the skilling, because I'm also in leather sector skill development council. We are seeing that a lot of jobs are being created. There is partnership of the industry in creating these jobs, but I think more proactive approach from the industry would also be required.
Fair enough. I mean, interesting insights there from the ground. Dr. Joshi, just a quick point. I mean, this is a time, and not just this year, but last year, the year before that, when global growth has been some of the strongest we've seen over the last 10 years or so. In such an environment, are we to blame external factors for the numbers that Archana earlier pointed out? The gap between the people who are getting skilled and the people who are getting placed? Is it a fault of the design, the program itself? I mean, what is it? Is it the employment situation, or is it employability?
I think it's both employment situation as well as employability. The skilling, what it does is it improves your employability, but you have to have demand for labor itself. So when the economy slows down, the labor intensity of the economy is anyway coming down, I think, year on year. So clearly you will require less people. And on top of that, if, as was pointed out earlier, the global economy recovered, there's no doubt. But and the global trade also recovered, which is more important, because before that, actually, global trade was trailing world GDP growth, and only since 2017, the world trade has started growing faster than the world GDP, which means the trade intensity of global growth is rising, and that throws up opportunities for exports. But in that year, we were not able to take complete advantage of the global recovery. One, I think, is a long-standing competitiveness issue, but I think the twin disruptions of demonetization and GST, I think, somewhat constrained us from taking full advantage of the global recovery. So there's some impact of the some impact of not being able to grow your exports. Actually, if you look at exports, whatever growth we have seen has largely come from sectors like petroleum, engineering, etc. The labor-intensive sectors have underperformed in 2017-18 quite a bit. So there is a global element, but I think there's a domestic element as well, because the domestic consumption demand itself slowed down. So that means, I think, less need to produce. So clearly, I think it's a mix of both. The global factor per se was not responsible, but what was responsible was our inability to take advantage of the global recovery. And on the domestic front, I think the transitory disruptions. So both of these factors together reduce the demand for labor. And I think even if you skill, then you don't have the requisite demand for those people.
So you said FY17. You made the point about FY17. I mean, you put out a recent report and you've looked at this in some detail. Can we make I mean, can we make that point about the last 4 years, which is that what is classified as labor-intensive sectors, they have underperformed. The growth has not come from there.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it's not only last 4 years, but I think even before that, I think the sectors like construction, manufacturing, which create employment, and within the services sectors like health and education, which are labor intensive, I think these sectors are not the leading engines of have not been the leading engines of growth for India. The other sectors, I think, in the last 2-3 years, I think we see public administration and defense, for instance, which is clearly not a very labor-intensive sector, and also I think financial services, etc. These sectors have grown faster than the traditional labor-intensive sectors. So clearly, two things. I mean, growth slowing down, and on top of that, the labor-intensive sectors underperforming the overall growth in the economy. I think. If I look at sector-wise, and I find that that the sectors that traditionally generate employment, they are not the ones which have contributed much to growth. So clearly, I think both these factors, I mean, slowdown and within the sectors, the labor-intensive sectors slowing down more than the labor light sectors. I think that is responsible for some loss of employment generation.
Yeah, taking that point forward, Mr. Joshi, you know, we have seen, and especially the data that we got from our RTI also suggested that some of the other sectors like that of telecom, IT services, as well as equipment manufacturers for telecom saw a large push as far as skilling is concerned. There was 11-fold in certain instances, 11-fold increase in number of people who were trained, but obviously not a corresponding rise as far as number of people getting jobs in those sectors are concerned. These are also some of the sectors where a lot of investment has been, had been promised, and the government has been pushing for growth and investment on ground in sectors like telecom, IT, as well as equipment manufacturing here in India. Let me bring in Mr. Agarwal over here in this conversation. Sir, why do you think there is a gap when we talk of these sectors? In your earlier role, you were also part of an association for telecom equipment manufacturing. What perspective can you bring in here as far as the gap between skilling in these sectors as far as jobs is concerned on ground?
Okay, first I tend to agree with Mr. Joshi that skill development alone cannot lead to the increased number of jobs. When we talk of increased number of jobs, it reflects a complete ecosystem in the country. And when we are talking of telecom, IT, or even the electronics, since when we have moved towards a situation of thinking of manufacturing them in India? I do remember that 4 years back, we were not talking about all that. Everything and anything in India, in electronics, telecom, IT, everything was imported. It was a regime of a 0% custom duty. Even a lead of a computer system was imported from China. Any component, a small handset of 1,000 rupees was also imported. So there was virtually no manufacturing. Forget about a small mobile handset. The entire telecom network was imported substantially from the two Chinese companies, ZTE and Huawei. When we talk of the electronics, TV, even this set boxes, everything was imported. That was the point of time when the present government started talking of Make in India as a program. Now, one can argue that in the last 4 years, the generation of employment into these sectors is not commensurate to the number of people who have been skilled into this area. But this is development of an ecosystem.
Okay, you're saying
it can't happen overnight.
Fair enough.
How the government, just give me a moment, how the government started, initially they said, okay, look, start with an assembly line, start with the packaging units. They put some percentage of reservation in the government procurement of Make in India. It helped. if you will look at it, all telecom companies today, they have set up a manufacturing base. Yes, it was an assembly line, it was a packaging unit. Now, what is next? The next is the differential rate of duty which the government has created. Now is leading these players not only to do the assembly lines, now they are moving towards the assembly of the components.
Sure.
It is not that the component manufacturing has started in India. So therefore, it is a step-by-step treatment which will lead to a larger Make in India program, and in the process, the generation of the employment. It can't happen overnight. Neither the China nor even the Korea, they could do it in a period of 2 years or 3 years.
I was making the point that you know, before a lot has happened over the last 4 years in terms of pushing manufacturing here in India, but maybe that is it's going to take time to bear fruit. So if you can put that assessment into numbers, and if it does show up in numbers, Mr. Joshi, what is your sense? Share of manufacturing, what has manufacturing really done? Very briefly, if you can tell our viewers over the last 4 years.
Yeah, sure. I think the share of manufacturing in India's GDP was 17.2% in 2012-13. In 2017-18, it rose by 80 basis points to 18%. So I think there has been a very gradual upward shift in the share of manufacturing. Now, I think this is because of a difficult global environment, I think, and also because, I think, of domestic disruptions which reduce the demand. And also, on top of that, I think many of the goods that we consume are not produced domestically, like electronic items, etc. So imports surged. So I think overall, I think these factors were responsible for weak growth in manufacturing. And just to put it in context, the objective is to raise the share of manufacturing in GDP to 25% by 2022. And for that, if you are to achieve that, that would require manufacturing to grow at more than 17–18% per year, which I think is an arduous task. So probably I think we'll have to scale down the target, but we are moving in the right direction, but at a very, very slow pace. I think we won't be able to achieve the targets at this pace.
Yeah, but you know, to achieve those targets also, the government has put out a lot of packages for various sectors. There are announcements like the leather and the textiles sectors in particular. There was also targets of skilling about 10 lakh people in the textile industry, a 2,600 crore package for the leather industry. But has enough been done by the government to push manufacturing and in turn job creation in these sectors? Mr. Sahai, do you think there is enough push on the ground by the government vis-a-vis all the promises that we hear? On ground, do we see a clearer picture?
No, in fact, when we are talking about the creation of the jobs, jobs will be created in what you call the brownfield product. That means the companies who are already operating, but jobs has to be created into new manufacturing also. When it comes to the new manufacturing, let us keep the environment around us also. Many of the competitors countries are providing much better support for the industry to set up their base in India. I will just highlight the example of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is coming into the leather sector in a big way, and they are going to provide huge kind of incentive for sector to thrive. We should also keep in mind that since Bangladesh is the least developed countries, whenever they export, they enjoy the tariff preference also. So while we support the industry, when we are looking into the export exposure of the industry, we have to be aware and conscious of the environment around us also. So if these factors are addressed, definitely to a large extent, I am sure the competitiveness of industry would be eroded. At the time, I think the need of the hour will be to ease the liquidity to these sectors, because the SMEs in the sectors, they are hard pressed for liquidity.
Mr. Sahai, Mr. Joshi, Mr. Agarwal, thanks very much, all of you, for being here on this show, on this special discussion. Appreciate your time, gentlemen. From Archana, me, thank you very much for watching this special discussion.